This is Basic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
Because of the Warner connection, coming from the movie business, I think they were under the impression that, with a lot of money and we just hire a lot of people, we could make this work. And it never quite happened. And my son had a newspaper route. And so I said, there's a lot better way we can do this. I think we could use the, Atari 800 to simplify some of this.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Zavitz. John Powers was co-founder of the Authorship Resource, the company that created all of the software for the CyberVision 2000 computer. From 1980 to 1982, he worked at Atari as Director of Software Development for Personal Computers. While he was there, he wrote 3 pieces of software for Atari Program Exchange: Newspaper Route Management Program, Computerized Card File, and Cosmatic Atari Development Package. He was later VP of Research and Development at educational software publisher The Learning Company. This interview took place on February 2nd, 2016. So mostly I want to talk about Atari, but first, I noticed that you were co-founder of the Authorship Resource, and
Correct.
I'd like to hear a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Oh, not a bit. At the time, we lived in Columbus, Ohio, and I worked as a research scientist for Battelle Memorial Institute. And we had a project. We did a lot of contract research, and we had a project with Control Data to commercialize Play-Doh, which was the computer-assisted instruction system out of the University of Illinois. Mm-hmm. And it was way ahead of its time. And it had touch screens and rear projection microfilm and used a plasma display. And it was a marvelous, marvelous system. And it was network-based, all run by a supercomputer. So the Control Data contracted Battelle to create exemplary lessons for CAI. And so I was the project manager, and one of the people on the project was Joe Miller. And so he and I and several other people, Bob Garmice and some others, worked on developing this sample software to show the different ways you can do computer-assisted instruction on the Play-Doh system. And so we had a terrific time doing it, and we learned a lot. And Joe Miller and I, we went to a conference on computer-assisted instruction, and coming out of the conference, I just said casually, it'd be really cool to just do this full-time. And he was in the cab, and he says, yeah, it really would. And so that got us thinking, and Joe and I decided to go off and start our own company and develop computer-assisted instruction software. So we got into that. We got a Play-Doh system, got our offices, got working on it, and we were approached by a startup company that was manufacturing a home computer for Montgomery Ward. Montgomery Ward's sporting goods department, wanted a computer that they could sell that would compete with some of the kind of home computer game machines that were coming out. And this company called CyberVision had a wonderful engineer who came up with a very low-cost, very elegant design for a home computer. And they were having trouble doing the software. The design engineer was overloaded. He was trying to also do the software. And this company, we literally stumbled across them, and they said, you guys do software? And we said, yeah. He said, well, we're going to do a demonstration of our computer to Montgomery Ward in about 2 weeks, and we don't have any software to show them. Can you help us out? And we said, sure. And we discovered right away, Joe and I, that they didn't even have anything resembling an operating system. So that's the first thing that we had to come up with. It was all in an 1802 assembler. And so we didn't know 1802 assembler. This is a RCA chip that came out, 8-bit processor. And so we very quickly did a self-taught course on 1802 assembler and wrote them a small operating system. It took up 2K in the ROM. And they liked it, and so we said, well, why don't you contract with us to develop some home computer software? And so they said, well, okay, we'll do that. And so we, Authorship Resource, was the sole developer of the application software for the CyberVision home computer that was sold by Montgomery Ward. And there's still fans out there of the CyberVision. Occasionally we get people wanting to know more about what that's like. And we developed about 20 or 30 applications in the area. We did games, we did database systems, we did a lot on educational software. One of the key features of CyberVision is that its storage medium was a cassette tape, and the engineer devised a way to use one half of the stereo head for data and the other half of the stereo head for audio. So we came up in software a way to synchronize the audio coming off the tape with the software that's running on the CyberVision. And so we did a lot of kids things. We did some educational software. And then our company was eventually bought out by the hardware company, CyberVision. And they had, they basically bought all of our assets. They bought our company. And we worked for them for a while, but they were having a lot of trouble getting the system through production, and they were never able to find somebody that could produce the system in a reliable fashion. So they went bankrupt. And so that's when I went out hunting for a job and got recruited by Atari. And that's the beginning of how we came west to California, and eventually recruited all the people that were in our little group, the Authorship Resource, and they did work for Atari and then spun off on their own and did some marvelous things on their own.
Now you worked with
California.
You worked with Ken Balthaser at both places, right?
Right. Ken was one of the people that we had hired at Authorship Resource. Ken, Brenda Laurel, Jeff Schwamberger. My wife worked there for a while, and of course, Joe Miller was my co-founder at the company, and he also did work for Atari as well.
Nice. All right, so you guys all trekked out to Atari and got hired en masse, it sounds like.
Well, I got hired first, and of course, Atari was it was a crazy place. They wanted to hire people. They wanted to build. They had a lot of capital money since Warner got involved, and they just wanted to hire. So I said, hey, I know some good people in Columbus. Why don't you hire them? And I think Ken was the first one to come out, and he worked at Atari, and then Joe and Brenda and Jeff Schwamberger. They all came out, but one at a time. And they would be, they'd start their job like Jeff. I think it was Jeff that recounts the time that he started his first day at Atari, and he's walking down, and they say, somebody said, hi, hey, you new? And he said, yeah, I am. And he says, where are you from? He says, well, I worked for a company in Columbus, Ohio. And he said, oh, you're one of the Ohio Mafia. So the group of us from Ohio became known as the Ohio Mafia because the other employees would kept seeing these people coming in from Ohio. So that stuck. So we've been the Ohio Mafia ever since, and we have our periodic reunions at various places in California.
Oh, that's awesome. You guys still get together, and that's wonderful.
Yes, definitely do. Keep in touch. Yeah, Ken Balthaser and I are very close, and we have a good time talking to each other and reminiscing and just keeping up with what's going on now.
That's great. Okay, so you, I believe, were hired as software development manager at Atari, right? Director of software development for personal computers. Right. Okay.
That's right.
What did they put you to work doing?
Well, I got to tell you about the time I was recruited. I was in California doing some interviews, and the recruiter called me and said, hey, there's some people from Atari, Warner, that want to talk to you. Why don't you go and talk to them? And I said, okay. I said, they're having a conference in Monterey, and this is like a business conference. Why don't you rent a car and go down there, and I'll hook you up with them. So I drove down to Monterey, and it was at some resort down there, and parked, and I found the person I was supposed to talk to, who was Steve Bristow, and he was a hiring manager. And he said, we had a very nice chat out by the swimming pool. Now, you got to remember, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. You come to California, it's a foreign country out here. I mean, it's so exotic compared to where Ohio was. And here we are sitting by the pool, of all places, for a job interview. So I was a bit dazzled already right there. And so Steve said, you've got to meet the president, or I've got somebody that I want you to meet or talk to you. So he said, I'll go get him. And so he went in the room, and he came out with somebody, and he's walking with this guy. He looked like a movie star. I swear it. He looked just like a movie star, and he's coming to me, and I'm going, I've seen this guy. I've got to have seen this guy. Oh, my goodness, I can't think of his name. I'm going to be so embarrassed. He wants, they're going to impress me with one of the actors from Time Warner, from the Warner Brothers studio. Well, it ended up being Michael Moon, I think his name was. And he was the president of Atari, and he did look like a movie star. So that was my introduction to Atari. It was first class all the way, razzle-dazzle, and jump on the roller coaster because we're going for a white-knuckle ride. And that's just the way it was when I started there at Atari.
Amazing. Wow. So what did they put you to work doing?
Well, they wanted to develop, they're working on the Atari 800, and they wanted to develop application software to sell for the 800. And so that was my job, basically, to create the department, set up the department that was going to develop the application software. They already had a group of programmers developing software for the VCS, the game console, which eventually became, I guess, the 2600.
Right.
And so they had a very interesting style of management there. Basically, each developer was his own designer, his own programmer, and basically they gave it an incredible amount of freedom to the game developer and designers to create these games. Well, they wanted, for the Atari 800, they wanted a full array of software, not just games. And so they wanted to branch out into some other areas. And so basically, I took the other areas on, and we started developing software for the Atari 800 there. And there was no infrastructure at all, so we had to acquire systems that would allow us to write the software and develop it and do the programming for it. So and get the offices and fix them up. So there was a lot of time spending just building the infrastructure and hiring people. And so that was a frantic, very fast-moving time. So I tell you, I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do, and I had a lot of practice doing both.
Oh, okay. So, well, all right. So what do you not do?
Well, I mean, here's this guy. This is me. I'm coming from a research and development background. I've always led a team of people. Our little company in Columbus, there was 5, 6 of us. And so there they throw me into this thing, and they want to build a multi-level department. And all of a sudden, you're at the deep end of the pool, right? And so we were just hiring people like crazy and trying to set them up. And you just move as quickly as you can and try to get good people in there and build up build up your management team. And I was very fortunate. There were some just great people that we got there, but there was constant pressure from upper management to get things out, get them out on time, to get things into a regular schedule and get them out on schedule. A lot of pressure in the marketing department. Anybody in software development knows that you can try to regiment these things, but it's just not going to work. There's just too much complexity and too many variables. So we were constantly trying to play catch up, and constantly being badgered by upper level management to get things, cut corners. That was what's the rule? It was either you got to have time or you got to have quality.
Oh, you can have it. You can have it fast. You can have it good, or you can have it cheap. You can pick any two.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody that's ever been in the computer game business knows what they're up against. It's still like that, even with these huge, well-funded games. You're still under constant pressure, and you're still doing these trade-offs of feature creep and never quite ready to release it, even when you're down to the wire and so on. So that was all new to me. So we just kind of grabbed on and just learned as we went along.
Nice. So it sounds like you were kind of tasked with non-game products. These were all mostly developed internally at Atari as opposed to outsourced. I mean, we'll get to the APX stuff later, but can you give me some examples of the software that you were managing?
Boy, that would be terrific, but I'll be honest with you. It's been 40 years.
Yeah.
And there's been so much software since then that I really can't help you with that one.
Okay.
About what it is. It's basically a blur.
I get that answer a lot. It's been 30 or 40 years.
I think I remember when we moved away from the Bay Area to come out here in the country. We had our garage sale and set all that Atari 800 consoles out and all those cartridges and everything, and they are long gone. And that was just fine with me. We move ahead and not hang around in the background that much in the history that much. So I wish I could help you. The Apex stuff you mentioned about that and about the newspaper route management program, I do remember that.
Yeah, how did you get? You tell me about that. How did you get wrangled into writing those things? I noticed that in the first Apex catalog, most all of it's written by Atari employees. It's like you guys are trying to prime it with stuff that you had already written, and before the user-generated software started showing up later. So
priming is a good word for it. They wanted to get something in the catalog. It was really a smart idea at the time. It was a bit of a distraction because we were trying to produce kind of commercial stuff, but it was a great idea. Fred Thorlin headed that up, and we wanted to prime it. And I was on the management track for a long, long time. But I had learned from my experience working for the part of the Authorship Resource that hands-on process of designing and writing the code and making it do something was just a thrilling process, and I never really wanted to let go of that. And so I'd come home at night and pull out the Atari 800 and write these programs. And I always discovered that this has been... I've done this even up to the current day. If I want to go after and develop some software, I always pick something that's in an area that I can see some kind of user need, that somebody needs to do this. And my son had a newspaper route. And so I said, there's a lot better way we can do this. I think we could use the Atari 800 to simplify some of this, come up with the little... the sheets that you use for keeping track of which customers are Sunday only and which are daily and how much they owe, and you'd have a little invoice you could give them when you went around to collect the money and so on. so that's what I did. I had an end user in mind, a practical application, and I said, let's do something with it. And we did the newspaper route management program. In fact, my son was just here the other day for dinner, and we were talking a little bit, reminiscing a little bit about using that program.
Did he actually use it after you created it?
Oh, sure, yeah. You don't want to do these things in a vacuum. I mean, he was my beta tester and my only customer. I don't know if they sold any of that at all. I don't remember anything of the records. I think they had some kind of a royalty program or something, but I think if I had made any significant money, I would have remembered it.
They paid a 10% royalty, and my understanding is that, yes, even if you were an Atari employee, you got royalty. So you probably made, $3 or something off of it, maybe.
I may have, but yeah, they had some kind of royalty plan going, but that was not the purpose. And then I think that spun off into some kind of a computerized card management system, kind of like a little database. And then,
Computerized Card File was actually the next catalog number up after newspaper route. Still really early, number 14, the 14th thing in the catalog.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when we were priming it, trying to get it started.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any specific about it? Or what did you use it for, or why you created it?
That one I don't remember. I probably used it to keep track of my cassette tapes at the time, my audio tapes, but you usually always have some practical application. I think the third one I did was the most unusual one. I called it the Cosmatic Atari. It was basically an 1802 assembler, so that you could write 1802 assembly language, symbolic assembly language, and this would assemble it into the hex code. And why in the world, there's no way to hook it up to a 1802 device or anything. Why in the world I did that? I think I just did that for a mental exercise, and because I was very sentimental about doing 1802 assembly language programming, because that's the first device I learned to do assembler on. Mm-hmm. So that was the third one. I think that was the only other one that I did for the Apex program.
So you could theoretically develop for the CyberVision 2000 using the Atari. Is that what
Well, yes, you could. I mean, you could basically write. Yeah, it was cute because it was a 1802 symbolic assembler written in Atari Basic. So it was kind of fun to write. And then out the other end came the hex that would run in the 1802. So, wow. I don't think there's a big market for that. I'm surprised that they sold a one.
Did they? I mean, do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Huh. So there's a project that I'm also sort of involved with where we're archiving all of the APX software and all of the manuals and everything. And we're getting there. We've got newspaper route management. We got the disk and manual for that, and computerized card file, but nobody has your Cosmetic Atari Development Package.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I have some. I thought about if I probably have some Apex software up in the loft, in those boxes, the boxes that you haven't opened for 20 years.
Yeah, I'm
so that are buried deeply. But I don't know. I don't think I have any Cosmatic Atari in there. I tell you what. I promise. If I ever find it, I'll let you have it. How's that?
Excellent. Sounds good. Thank you. Once I have it, the world will have it because I'll move it to a modern computer and upload it to Internet Archive and.
The world will be so lucky to have
I know.
it, yes.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I would go over I would pore over the APX catalogs, and just read every software, and I could never even figure out what the Cosmatic Atari Development Package was. Just like that. That was beyond me.
Well, I wish I had some of the original documentation for it, or even a listing or anything like that. But that's long gone. I mean, we didn't have the technology back then to easily archive any of this.
Sure.
And I don't even know if I have the original packaging. But if I do, I'll be happy to share it with you. It was a lot of fun for me because it kept me connected with some of my 1802 assembler experience, which I really had enjoyed a lot. We did a lot with that. So, and it was a good way to learn Atari Basic as well.
Nice. All right, so I know you were only at Atari for a couple of years, but what haven't we talked about your Atari time? What other things come to mind?
Well, I think there was a lot of good people there that I remember, watching the upper level management at work was an educational experience for me. Warner, again, had a lot of capital, had a lot of money, and wanted to move very, very fast. And it was one of these things, let's just throw a lot of horsepower at it and see if we can get it moving. And you always got to see this frustration that I guess my assumption is that because of the Warner connection, coming from the movie business, I think they were under the impression that, with a lot of money and we just hire a lot of people, we could make this work. And it never quite happened like that. I mean, we like in any software development, it's just so complex that, and it's so tough to predict, the quality of something that you're going to produce, that you always were under that kind of pressure. And they brought in some really good senior managers from kind of the computer industry. I remember Roger Badisher and Bruce Irvine. And so these people were very strong, and they tried to apply what I would call the IBM model to putting this together, which meant, very detailed specs, very regimented process and things, and it just didn't seem to work at all. And around 1982, things started to get really crazy at Atari. They were spending a lot of money bringing in people to try to get it moving, and it just didn't seem to be making much sense. So I got recruited out of there. I got a call that said, "You want to work on a brand new computer that's really revolutionary?" And I said, "Well, tell me more." And then so that's when I left Atari, and then things started. It kept going on for a little bit longer, but it looked like the beginning of the end right then, around about the time I left, which was very unfortunate. So, but I'm glad. It's very exciting to see that there's so many enthusiasts that still have an interest. And it was a very nice machine, the Atari 800, and they were going in the right direction. That's for sure. Now, how it could have been done better, I wouldn't know. I mean, maybe. I think a lot of these things we have to take some risks. And we have to try things, and if we don't work, okay, it's going to hit a dead end, but people are going to learn from it, and a lot of good people came out of that Atari experience and did a lot of very good things. So I think that's probably was its value. I remember meeting the coin-op people were just fascinating, and so people like Ed Rotberg, and he did, the one Battle Zone, that's what it was. And they were a brilliant, creative group of people, and they were able to retain kind of this independent spirit. It's almost like an independent software developer working in the shell side of a company. And so CoinOp seemed to do much better, and because they kind of were able to preserve that. And it was all games. It wasn't so-called serious software. And so somehow when you get into the serious software, people want to be really serious about it. I think that kind of spoils it. So,
yeah.
So
I saw something about you might have worked on a prototype modem for the Atari 400. Maybe you did the software for that. Do you remember anything about that?
No, I don't remember. I remember no, I'm afraid I can't give you any insights into a modem for the Atari.
It was
400.
like they wanted to make a terminal out of the Atari 400, and they were going to have an internal modem, and that's anyway. Your name was associated with that, so I thought I'd ask. It sounds interesting.
Well, that's quite possible. I've always been interested in doing, communicating with other devices, and a lot of the work I do now deals with interconnecting with other things in the outside world. So when I was at Battelle, we did a lot of work doing simulations using teletypes and some of the, what now is very old-fashioned technology. But it always was interesting to try to interconnect computer devices. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, okay, let's jump ahead for a minute. Since you mentioned what do you do today?
Well, I wear two hats. We have a 27-acre ranch, so I get outside a lot, and we have horses, and so I've got to take care of them and take care of the ranch, and so we do a lot of work outside, harvest our own firewood, things like that. And then when I come inside, I develop software for iOS and tvOS. I've got 9 iPhone, iPad, tvOS apps, Apple TV apps in the Apple Store, yes. And so that's a heck of a lot of fun writing for that system. So that's what I do to kind of still keep my toe in the water.
You did something with Ken Balthaser called Star Trucks?
Oh yeah, that was great.
Tell me about it.
Well, Ken had this idea ever since Atari times for a kind of a coin-op style game that he would like to see done, and we talked regularly. And I said, well, let's just do it. Let's write one for the iPhone and iPad. And so it was my first venture into doing a game environment for the iPhone and iPad, and we did it. He's down in he's also in the Sierra foothills down in El Dorado County, and or down by Placerville. And so we talk by phone almost daily, and he came up with a design for the program, what it should do, and then I did the programming for it. And so we just started from scratch, wrote a spec, and then started putting it together and sharing it. And I think we spent about, it's not a full-time job because we were doing other things as well. So we spent about 1.5 years developing this program. And I loved the process. I really enjoyed it, and I loved working with Ken. And we came up with this kind of coin-op style game that, had lots of noise and action and things like that. And I learned a lot about Cocos for the iOS system and some of the game development software that's available. So it was fun. It's never been a good seller. We still have people that we have a free-to-play version that's available at the Apple Store. It's called Star Trucks LX. That's a free-to-play. So we still get people downloading it and trying out. We definitely are not going to be millionaires on this one, but we sure had a good time making it. And I think it shows in the game. The game, I think, is a lot of fun, and I think it's because we had fun doing it.
Well, what's your best seller in the iPhone app space right now?
Well, that's a little bit of a story. I had developed a app called Beer Master for the iPhone, and it's to keep track of beer that you taste. And that happens to be one of my interests is drinking beer and different kinds of beer and enjoying beer. So I wrote an app for the iPhone. And, I write these apps for myself, and then I say, well, maybe somebody else is interested. So I put them up on the App Store. we had a neighborhood. We hosted a neighborhood party, and right here in Nevada County, and we hosted a neighborhood party. We had about 25, 30 people come by, and we went around, and everybody said what they were doing, and I stood up and said, I got my new app, Beer Master. It was my first iPhone app. And, I told a little about it. And, of course, these people immediately, they're glazing over because I'm geeking out about my app. And one of them, after it came up, he said, have you ever thought about doing an app about marijuana? And I'm thinking, well, no, that didn't cross my mind. Well, Nevada County is the second or third largest marijuana-producing county in California. And so I didn't know this, but this person happened to be an expert on the subject. And I said, I know nothing about it. He said, well, I heard what you said about your beer program. And he said, you could probably adapt that to cannabis. And I said, how would I do that? And I said, well, if you could give me, examples of how you would see it adapted, let me know. So he went back, and he came back with these 3x5 cards, and he did a wonderful mapping of how Beer Master would look if it was cannabis instead of beer. And I was very impressed. And so we launched into a partnership on that. And then from that, we ended up, I got in touch with a publisher who publishes books about cannabis. And so I went to him and said, we're developing an app, and would you let us license your content? And they said they would. And they publish books called Big Buds, and there's a series of them. And so they basically licensed their content. I took their content and packaged it up in an iPhone app, and that has been my best-selling app. It's called Big Buds. And it's it's kind of fun to talk about it. I'm afraid I don't have any personal experience about the use of the product to talk about, but it's very well regarded in the industry because we had such wonderful content that could go into the app. So that was my biggest seller.
Wow. So I don't think that's not fair, though. You know beer, and you made the beer app. I think that it behooves you to smoke out a little and see if you got to know your product, sir.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. You're saying I'm not doing very good research. Well, I also did when the Palm Pilot first came out. I started writing apps for that, and people would come to me, and I ended up doing one called Cigar Master for the Palm Pilot, and I don't smoke cigars. And I did another one called Whiskey Master, and my experience with that is very small. I'm afraid I'm just a beer and wine guy. So I ended up doing Wine Master as well. So I just limited to those vices. I kind of thought about maybe my company's subtitle should be, all the vices fit for people. So
Nice.
We help you with your vices. I don't know.
Well, if
that's my bestseller.
That's awesome. If that starts waning, you can always go back to making a newspaper route management app.
But it's a heck of a lot of fun doing these apps, especially since most of them they sell very well in the U.S., but also outside the U.S. Some of them, more than half of the sales are outside the U.S., and I love the thought of it being used all over the world. Some of these are used in like 30 or 40 countries, and so just the idea of this international nature of these things is I think, very exciting. I've got one for weather called Weathercat, and its sales outside the United States are greater than the U.S. sales. And I've localized it for, of course, English, French, German, and Spanish. And so that even broadens your appeal. So fascinating area. I think it's just great. And to think that we started, working with things like Apex and things, sitting in front of their Atari 400 or 800 doing newspaper route management. Yeah. And now we have people all over the world, checking out your cannabis So I think that's terrific.
I've heard Apex described as the first app store, and I'm wondering, as someone who developed for both Apex and the App Store, if you would say that that's correct.
Well, that's a wonderful analogy comparison, because you're right. Apex, I think, was a forerunner in being the first app store, just from the viewpoint of a storefront. The world of Atari and Apple are totally different. Apex basically, they did a nice job packaging it, doing it fairly inexpensively. User manual. It was all driven by the author. Nowadays, to get it's in one sense, it's easy to get an app into the App Store, but the hoops you have to run through in terms of code signing and security and the legal kind of things that you have to agree to, all of which are fine, but the world has become, the world of marketing, publishing software has become so exceedingly complex. I'm just amazed it works as well as it does. So,
yes. Yeah. It was an easier time. All right, I want to hop back in the Wayback Machine again. So you left Atari, and you did. We're not going to do your whole career, but some of this stuff is super interesting to me. You went to Convergent Technologies, where you did the WorkSlate notebook computer, which I don't know anything about, and I'm curious about what you did there. And tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Convergent was a company that made kind of desktop computers for other people, what they call OEM suppliers. So they made a desktop computer for Burroughs and some of the other companies, and they were having a great success of that. And one of their key executives came up with this idea for a personal computer, a personal portable computer. And his vision, his name was Matt Sanders, was a notebook computer that was 8.5 by 11 by 1 inch thick. Now, this is 1982. Mm-hmm. And so he wanted a totally self-contained computer that you could just carry around like a notebook, way ahead of his time. And so he was not the kind of person to say it's not impossible. And so they recruited me because of my background dealing with microprocessors and developing software for microprocessors. And so they thought that might be the way to go. And so this was very hush-hush. It was all very secret. They wanted to get the whole project done within a year, which at the time was just phenomenal. And they had a large budget, but it was fixed. And so they had to not only come up with the industrial design, but source all these parts, and also we had to write the software for it and firmware. And I was very fortunate to have a wonderful software development team, and we had a great success writing the software for it. And it was and we did produce the product, and they did get it in production. They wanted the production done, or at least the assembly in the U.S. So it was at the time the largest application of surface mount technology ever done, because it was one large board of about 8 by 10 board, and it was the first time they've done surface mount. In other words, putting all the semiconductor components on the surface, not plugging them in. And so they brought in all this equipment from Switzerland, precision devices. So we got to see how this was all done and put together. So that I thought was very fascinating. We had a great success with the software. We did meet our goals on schedule, and they got the product out. And so that was a wonderful feeling of success. And the big problem with the WorkSlate was that they couldn't get the price down. And so they wanted to sell it for like $400 or $500. I think it cost $600 to make it. And so they never could get the price range. So they tried marketing it high end. It got sold through the American Express catalog and so on, but they just never could get the cost within a reasonable target range. There's a little anecdote I got to share, and I think is a turning point, or could have been a turning point. Matt Sanders and I went to one of the big conferences, and we had a face-to-face meeting with Bill Gates. And so we went to the suite, and Matt and Bill Gates and I sat down. Bill Gates was very interested in the work slate. Well, everything was very quiet, and the secrecy was important. So this was pretty astonishing to be showing him this work slate. And so Matt talked about it, and I talked about it, and we had an operating prototype in hand, and he looked at it and admired it, and he said, I would be willing to license you our Microsoft Basic language for free if you want to put it on this machine. So, and that was a key decision point. And Matt decided that no, that wasn't the target audience. We didn't want to sell it. We didn't have the user that he had in mind was an executive that liked to use spreadsheets, but that didn't know anything about programming and didn't want to do programming. And so to this day, the question arises, if you had opened up the software so that people could actually program the work slate to do other things, would that have made a difference in its future? Well, it never got opened up. It was basically a closed system, and we'll never know the answer to that question.
Wow. And then you ended up at the Learning Company. You're VP of Research and Development. What were you developing and researching there?
Well, we did Learning Company, did children's educational software, Reader, Rabbit, and things like that. Very successful company. And so, we had a software development team. We were doing all sorts of things in math, early young children development, things like that. And so, but this was back to a small development team and some very innovative marketing by the President Bill Dinsmore. And so that was kind of fun. He was very strong in merchandising and marketing, so I learned a lot just by observing him. And we just had a really nice time with the software development team. But I just eventually at that point, I got the urge to say, I really, really want to get back into doing things on my own. And so we had the early Reader Rabbit stuff, and the early software was all the Apple II. That's how they really got their name. And then the big push from Bill was to go to MS-DOS. So that was kind of what I helped him through, how to make that adaptation from Apple II to the MS-DOS, because they just wanted to open up their marketplace. So we did get the MS-DOS products out, and we started looking at the Macintosh, because the Mac had just come out, and so we were looking at what we can do in that area. But we did get the MS-DOS products out, and that really was a big shot in the arm for the company, and it did very well. And I said, I think I've done my part here, so I think I want to go independent. And so I left the company, and that's when I started out on my own. And it was good. I really enjoyed it. That was a good decision. And I'm glad the company did very well, and it was very good to me.
Great. Is there anything we haven't discussed that we should have that the Atari community needs to know?
Oh, no, I think we've pretty well covered the Atari community. I think it's very impressive how the Atari community is held together so well and so strong, and the impression that it made on people. And I think not only impression from the user's viewpoint and how people enjoyed those products, but also from the inside out, and the crazy, wild roller coaster ride it was try and develop all that and get it going. And I'm glad it stuck. I'm glad people had fond memories about the Atari. I certainly do. And it was my introduction to the world of computing in Silicon Valley in California. So it was a terrific start. It was like a catapult start into the world of software development in California. And we never left. We're still here, still enjoying it.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay, last question. If you could send a message to the Atari computer community that still exists, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Oh, I said, keep up that spirit. Atari was an innovator, and I hope all of you will be innovators as well. And don't forget to take some risks. And the gaming community has become huge. It's, multinational, big business. But don't forget, it just starts with the individual. It starts with somebody being very excited about something and willing to put a lot of enthusiasm and energy into trying it out and taking those chances and making it happen. So don't give up on that. Keep that spirit going.
Perfect. I have what I need. Thank you so much, John.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.